people know my background from yesterday's speech, that my real specialty is artificial intelligence and robotics and redefining what human beings will be in the future. And a lot of people find this scary. I don't want to be redefined. I don't like this idea, something that's beyond my control. The very sense of self is going to be altered. Well, you're actually under a lot of control systems, and you have been since birth. So I was talking a little bit about mind control in particular, and something that I worked on that I'm not proud of, but it's called the Voice of God weapon. So there are 4 different techniques and technologies that can pipe voices into an individual's head. And once you can do that, you can control them using neuro-linguistic programming techniques. You're rewiring their thought processes and brains. And so this gets into what's called offensive information warfare. And they used it, I believe, in the Gulf War to tell the enemy at that time, lay down your guns, this is Allah. And it worked pretty well, because hearing voices which have no direction or sound, you have to assume that it's some spiritual entity. So it works pretty well. And then, I don't know if I'm going to get into this, but there's something called hyper game theory. How do you, they want to see if they can manipulate people to do things that are irrational, but also walk them to their death. And so you can call it a eugenics program even. And they need to sample all cultures, language throughout the world to define the probability matrices of which tricks, techniques, deception works. That's just what's happening. Now we have which are magnetically activated nanoparticles and sensors. So how do you control the brain? Most people don't believe that. Oh, you can't control me. I have my own free will. There's no way you can get to my soul. Well, sorry, that's not true. So these nanoparticles are activated under certain magnetic frequency and will alter the brain patterns and pathways. Recently, my school came out, Harvard came out with what you see here on the right slide is the magnified view of a needle that's injected into the brain and puts the scaffolding over the brain, and then it's read that way at a much finer resolution. So let's talk about a little bit about deciphering the audio and visual cortex. So researchers at the University of California, Berkeley have invented a brain decoder device that's able to work out what you're thinking based on neural activity inside of the brain. Now, they use mostly what's called functional MRIs. But you could use any of these technologies that I've talked about. If you're reading text in a newspaper or book, you hear a voice in your own head. Usually, most people are reading kind of aloud in their own head. Well, they can read that, decipher the words that you were thinking to yourself. So there's another one, University of LA, maybe Stanford University. They are decoding visual images. So they train the person under a functional MRI, that's the standard technique, to look at images, and then they record them, and then they ask the person to imagine the object. It can also just be imaginary, and the computer will decipher the brain code, and so you're looking at a hammer, you're looking at a saw, that's a house, that's a cat. So the technology in the civilian sector is coming along quite quickly. Somebody apparently from NASA leaked this as something they were working on. And telepathy, electronic two-way communications. Well, we have that now. And that's very scary if you never experienced it. Making humanity think an alien invasion is about to occur at every major city. Well, we have holograms in the sky. I describe that technology. And, they talked about other things that might make this come about. But all I am saying is beware.
Yeah, can you elaborate on hyper game theory and so-called walking people to their death?
Okay. Yeah, so hypergame theory came out of a professor at Dartmouth, obviously funded by the Air Force and DARPA and etc. All the acronyms, and it came from a man that died recently, a brilliant man named John Nash. Who there was a movie made about him called The Beautiful Mind, and he was a mathematician who won a Nobel Prize, and he created game theory, which is used in economics as well as war theory. Now, it relies on rational players, so you run these simulations. What will China do if we make this move? What is the theory, the game, the war game going on? Or you can use it in business, similar process. Hypergame theory is one level above of that abstraction, that you don't know what game they're going to play. So they use it in cyber warfare, mostly. And attackers, hackers, they'll use several different techniques. But the defenses, the administrator, and the virus protection, they don't know what game these hackers are using. So they create a probability matrix over the period of the time of sampling all the different kinds of hacks they get. Now you can apply this to other aspects of life. The way that I was using it is they're trying to, it was called mind hacking. So they're trying to hack a targeted individual, and the target individual will create mental defenses as best as they can. They'll go to their social networks. Well, what do? They try to disrupt the social network, so you have no family or friends. It's a back and forth game that they're trying to find out the maximum probability of death, and the example that you use, where you'll commit suicide or you'll harm somebody, become a Manchurian candidate or something like that. So it's huge database of probabilities across all the variations of mind. The human genome, I think we have, I'm going to get this wrong, so I'm not even going to say it, but a finite in the hundreds of thousands of different genes across our species. And we mapped them out in the Human Gene Project. Well, now it's the Human Mind Project, the Global Brain Project. President Obama just recently funded a whole bunch of scientists to decipher the mind. Well, our previous president, same thing, George Bush, said the same thing. They're trying to decipher every possible thought and uniqueness due to culture and language and whatnot.
I've got a quick question. Just to confirm, you said you were a little bit embarrassed, ashamed that you'd worked on a project called The Voice of God.
Yeah.
And to your understanding, it had been used in the Iraq War, but you worked on it. Can you tell us what the name of the project in the military as it was being developed was, and how much was spent on it?
Oh, no, I wasn't interested in budgets or names, but the nickname was Voice of God. But it goes under a lot of different names, different variations. And so let me talk about some of the technology. It's called the microwave hearing effect, which with directed microwaves, this was discovered by a guy named Frey, and they're not totally sure what the mechanism is, but they hypothesize that the brain expands ever so slightly with this energy, heat energy, that gets conducted to the inner ear. There are several other technologies that use ion cyclotron resonance heating or calcium C2+, as a mechanism of influencing the nervous system. And all the ions have their different resonances under the Earth's magnetic field. And and then you can go into the ultrasonic realm, where anybody in the beam, when the ultrasound waves, won't hear anything. It's above human hearing. But where the waves intersect from two different directional sources, all of a sudden that person hears it, and that's called the audio spotlight. So there are a lot of mechanisms to project voices into people's heads.
Thank you.
Hello. I have a question that relates to step 3 in Project Bluebeam. It concerns telepathic electronic two-way communication. I wondered if it was possible for images to be directed into the thoughts and the minds. For a number of reasons, for myself and I've spoken to
Yeah, in fact, all 5 senses can be mildly overridden depending on the state. Now, if you're in a sensory deprivation tank, your mind seeks stimulus, hearing, sight, temperature, anything. So if you're in that situation, your dreams become your reality. Your brain cannot tell the difference. But in other circumstances, if you stay well stimulated, it's difficult to project visual images into the target. But even university professors are working on those. So yes, it's absolutely possible and is being done. In fact, many people complain about forced dreams or something like that their dreams are not their own. And that can be, there are a whole bunch of subconscious ways that can be done, as well as stimulating the visual cortex in the right patterns and try to project them into the target. Yeah.
So who would be projecting these, which organisation would be projecting these, who's responsible? Can't say. Okay, but it just seems to be very real because I've heard it from more than one source, and it can be
quite real.
Because you're awake, you're not asleep necessarily.
Yeah, and it projects also in the visual workspace, as I mentioned before, so it's like your third eye, and you can see both your, through your retina, as well as this other projection at the same time. Your brain's been rewired, and it's inserting this third eye projection, if you will.
Is there any way we can protect against it?
No, great question. No, you can dampen the effects through stimulating your senses, like music or that kind of thing, and that seems to help. Certain drugs can dampen the effects. But no one's found a little device that you can wear around that will block the signal.
Hat you can wear.
No tinfoil hats, no, they don't work.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll come down on stage actually, because I think it's probably going to be the last question. Now, Dr. Duncan, you've given us a lot of reason over the last 2 days to be concerned by the potential for abuse of this technology. At the end of your presentation today, you feel quite optimistic about the idea of transhumanism. I mean, maybe you're talking about a perfect world where we can draw perfect circles or whatever. But in my view, how is it possible for transhumanism to be a good thing without some almost unimaginable social revolution? And I mean, as Max Egan, I don't know if you've seen Max Egan's video about transhumanism. He puts it very very succinctly, and he says, how much can we be transhumanized without losing our humanity, especially where we have rulers who have none?
That's an excellent point, and that's why I try to ask more questions than I answer. It has to be a social revolution. I mean, that's the only way it could be accepted by society. But this is so gradual within our generations that it will become more and more acceptable. So people walking around with Bluetooth, headsets, well, now we accept that. They look like the Borg, and so slowly this will eventually be rolled in, and we won't give it another thought. When a child is born, we genetically engineer them, with blue eyes or whatever they.
Some might argue, though, that the technology we already have. The technology we already have is sort of cutting us off from each other. I'm guilty here myself. I apart from my family in my hometown and the men I live with, I know one person. But I have thousands of friends online, so maybe.
Yeah. So is that just a redefinition of how to be social? What is a friend on Facebook? How often you talk to them? You can't shake their hand, you can't hug them. I don't know. This is something society is going to have to deal with. This is a social revolution. It's occurring right now at a very rapid rate. I call it a cataclysmic evolutionary event in mankind.
Because also, since we do have a malevolent elite in this world, the potential danger here is enormous.
It is, and I think there may be an agenda to depopulate the world.
Oh, I think there is.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, sleep tight. I know, but it's grim stuff. I know, and it is
grim stuff.
It is.
Leave on a happy note.
Look at it this way. If people are not talking about this, then it'll be an awful lot worse than the people are talking about it. That would really scare me if this was going on and people were not talking about it. So, Dr. Robert Duncan, thank you very much for speaking to us again.
Thank you for having me.